In April 2013, Google began selling Google Glass to a small group of early adopters it called Glass Explorers. The price was $1,500. The product was a pair of glasses with a small display in the upper right corner, a camera, a microphone, and a speaker. It could display information from the internet, take photos and video, provide navigation, and connect to smartphones via Bluetooth. The technology worked. The concept was genuinely forward-looking. The specific problems Glass was designed to solve: the friction of pulling out a phone to access information, the ability to take photos without a device in hand, heads-up navigation while walking or driving were real problems that real users would eventually want solved. By January 2015, Google had stopped selling Glass to consumers and shut down the Explorer program. The product that had been described as the future of computing had lasted approximately 2 years in its consumer form. Google Glass failed, and in 2023, smart glasses with broadly similar capabilities, augmented reality glasses from companies including Meta and others, were being developed and deployed at scale. The technology Glass pioneered is being commercialized, a decade later, by companies that did not have to invent it from scratch because Glass had already demonstrated what the core capabilities were. The question worth examining is not whether Glass was too early. It clearly was. The question is what too early means. Specifically, what the gap was between what Glass was and what the market was ready for, and whether that gap was a product problem, a market problem, or something else entirely. The product problem with Google Glass is well documented and relatively straightforward. The battery lasted approximately 1 day with moderate use. The display was small, requiring deliberate eye movement to view, and was not always visible in bright sunlight. The $1,500 price point was accessible only to the early adopter segment that Google explicitly targeted with the Explorer program. The Wi-Fi connectivity was dependent on a nearby smartphone, which meant Glass was an accessory to the phone rather than a standalone device. These are product problems, real ones, that real users encountered and that real reviews documented. They are also the specific kinds of product problems that first-generation devices routinely have limitations that subsequent product generations typically address. Battery life, display quality, price, and connectivity are all addressable engineering problems. The standard trajectory for a technology category is: first generation demonstrates concept, subsequent generations address the first generation specific limitations. The product problem alone does not explain why Glass failed, because the trajectory it implies iterative improvement toward a viable consumer product is the trajectory of almost every technology category. The product problem was real and solvable. The market problem with Google Glass is less discussed and more instructive. Glass generated, in 2013 and 2014, a specific social reaction that no amount of technical improvement was going to address. People who were wearing Glass made other people deeply uncomfortable. The discomfort was specific. The camera was always present, always potentially recording, in a form factor that made it impossible for anyone near the Glass user to know whether they were being recorded. The term Glasshole entered the cultural vocabulary in 2013, a specific compound insult for people who wore Google Glass in public. Bars and restaurants began posting "No Google Glass" signs. A Glass user was assaulted in a San Francisco bar. The social rejection of the product was not about the technology. It was about what the technology implied about the social contract of public space. Have you ever watched a product fail not because of what it was, but because of what it signaled to the people who encountered it? Leave a comment. The specific failure mode of Glass rejection by the social environment rather than by the individual user is one that product development processes are systematically under-designed to anticipate. Standard product development evaluates the experience of the person using the product. Is the interface intuitive? Does the battery last long enough? Is the price appropriate for the value delivered? These are user-centered metrics, and they are the right metrics for most product categories. Glass required an additional metric that was not user-centered: How does the presence of this product affect the people around the user? This metric is rarely asked in product development because most products do not impose visible costs on the people who are not using them. A smartphone is used privately. The people around a smartphone user are not materially affected by the fact that the phone has a camera. A pair of glasses with an always present camera changes the terms of social interaction for everyone near the user, regardless of whether the user is recording. This is the specific category of product failure that, years ahead, obscures. Glass was not just years ahead of the technology. It was years ahead of the social norms that would be required to make the technology acceptable. And social norms cannot be accelerated by engineering improvements. They develop on their own timeline, through collective social negotiation about what kinds of surveillance and recording are acceptable in what contexts. The Meta Ray-Bans of 2024, which have a camera and can record, succeeded where glass failed, partly because the social negotiation about cameras and glasses had been happening for a decade since glass. That negotiation was not completed by glass, but glass began it. The social norm that made smart glasses partially acceptable in 2024 was not available in 2013. Glass arrived before that norm existed. If the specific distinction years ahead of the technology is a solvable problem, years ahead of the social norm is not, is what makes this channel worth your time. The like is the direct signal. The approximately 200 people who worked on Google Glass at the peak of its consumer development were not working on a failed technology. The technology was real. The applications were real. The specific problems Glass was addressing, heads-up information access, ambient photography, context-aware computing, are applications that the industry has continued to pursue because they are genuinely valuable. They were working on a technology that had arrived before the social environment was ready to receive it, in a product form that made the social friction of premature arrival impossible to overlook. The camera was the specific element that made the discomfort unavoidable. The discomfort was not about the technology's quality. It was about the social implications of a product that made every person near a glass user a potential subject of recording, without any reliable mechanism for knowing whether recording was occurring. The engineers who solved the technical problems of glass had solved the right technical problems. The social problem was not a technical problem. It was a problem about the norms of consent and surveillance in public space. A problem that technology cannot solve, and that product development processes are not designed to evaluate. Google ended the consumer program in January 2015 and redirected Glass toward enterprise applications, industrial inspections, medical procedures, manufacturing quality control, where the social friction was absent because the social context was different. In industrial settings, all workers were aware of the cameras, consent was implicit in the work context, and the productivity benefits were large enough to make the trade-offs unambiguous. The product that was rejected in consumer settings has operated productively in enterprise settings for a decade. The social norm problem was specific to the consumer context. The technology problem was absent in both. The Glass case teaches a specific lesson about the relationship between technology readiness and social readiness that the standard "too early" framing compresses into a single observation. Being too early can mean two things. The first, the technology that enables the product to be viable doesn't yet exist or isn't good enough. This is the standard definition, and it is the kind of too early that subsequent product generations address. Battery life improves, displays improve, prices fall, the technology catches up. The second, the social norms that enable the product to be acceptable haven't developed yet. This is a different problem that product generations don't address, because it is not a product problem. Social norm development happens in a different domain, on a different timeline, through a different process than product development. The practical thing, for any product that places visible capabilities in the hands of one user that affect the people around that user, cameras, microphones, tracking technology, augmented reality, the question to ask before development is not only will users want this, it is, how will the people who encounter users of this product respond to its presence? If the answer is, we don't know, or, we haven't asked, the product faces a market risk that no engineering improvement will address. That question, asked of Glass in 2012, before the Explorer program launched, would have identified a specific and serious market risk. The risk was not hidden. The camera on a face-worn device was visible. The implications of that camera in public social settings were predictable. The social response, Glasshole, was the predictable response to an unpredicted variable that the product development process had not included in its evaluation. The next episode looks at a case where a single meeting lasting 20 minutes produced a decision that determined the outcome of something far larger than the people in the room understood at the time they were making it. This content was developed with the support of artificial intelligence tools and underwent human review, editorial curation, and approval before publication. The analysis presented here is strictly educational and philosophical in nature, grounded in behavioral psychology and classical Stoicism.